So it's morning around here and we are baking a little coffee cake for breakfast, and I'm pulling this recipe out of my Magnolia Cookbook Volume 2. Now, if you didn't catch the last video I posted, I told all the things about our trip to Waco and to see the Magnolia Silos, but while I was out there, I did pick up the second edition of the cookbook. So today I thought it'd be really fun to go through a breakfast, lunch, and dinner that's all inspired by the Magnolia Table Cookbooks.
The Magnolia Table Cookbooks are collections of recipes for gathering. I love just about every recipe that's inside of them, and I'd highly recommend either of the two volumes. I've noticed in volume 2, I'm going to be able to use this as more of a reference. There's some entertaining guides, even some guides on how to use herbs in your cooking, and just some good home-based recipes for sauces, breads, pasta, and more. My husband says that my favorite thing to do is change up a recipe, and that's exactly what I'm going to be doing today. So I hope it inspires you to do the same thing. Everything I'm creating today will be available on the blog and the link below.
Are you ready to show them how we finished our coffee cake?
First thing I'm going to do to make our coffee cake is put together our streusel topping, and all that is sugar, all-purpose flour, cinnamon, and some cold unsalted butter. And once I get all that in the bowl, I'll just use my pastry cutter and make fine crumbs. The cake batter is really easy to throw together. You just start by creaming your butter and sugar, add in the wet ingredients, and then finally the dry. Spread it in an 8x8 pan. Once my oven's preheated to 350, I'm just going to add that cold streusel topping that I've had in the refrigerator, waiting, and spread it evenly over the top. I'm baking this in my square flexi flat from BonCOOK. These are my favorite baking dishes, which I hope to share more about in the future, but if you'd like to see more, I have a link below. So once that's baked for about 30 to 35 minutes, you just want to make sure that when you stick a toothpick in, that it comes out clean. You never have to spray grease or oil any of these pans, and they're totally non-stick, which is why I love them, and they're perfect for something like coffee cake that's got a lot of crumbles and it tends to stick anyways. So once that cooled down a little bit, I just cut it into some squares and put it on a serving platter. This was the best coffee cake that I think I've ever tried. It was so moist yet crumbly and just delicious, and paired with a nice warm cup of that Magnolia pressed coffee that I picked up, it was just a perfect combination. If you love something sweet in the morning to go with your coffee, or if you're looking for a great little treat to bake up for a friend, this is it. Moving on to lunch. So I recreated this sandwich that I used to get when I was in college from one of my favorite delis. There's a recipe in the cookbook called brick paninis, and there's two versions, a margarita version and a turkey and roasted red pepper. But I'm creating my own version based on that delicious sandwich that I used to order from Calistoga. You'll need a foil wrapped brick, tomatoes, turkey, Asiago cheese, rustic sourdough bread, spinach artichoke dip, and some caramelized onions. The most time-consuming part of this sandwich is going to be caramelizing your onions, but these could be made ahead of time, or you could even use some leftover onions, whatever you have. Basically, you just want to chop that onion, get it in some olive oil and some butter over a low to medium heat, and let it just keep sizzling until it gets nice caramely brown. This is going to allow all of those natural flavors from that sweet onion to come right out. Feel free to add some brown sugar for some more sweetness, or even a dash of balsamic vinegar gives these a nice acidic touch. Either way, those rich, buttery notes of sweet onions are going to elevate this sandwich. I've preheated my cast iron griddle, and I'm going to start with laying down a piece of buttered bread and then putting the artichoke spread. I'm going to grate some of that Asiago over top. Then I'm going to lay down my turkey breast, and then come those beautiful caramelized onions with some chopped tomatoes to go on top. Next, I'm shredding more cheese on top, because can you ever have enough cheese? Plus, this is going to act like glue. And then I'm going to spread some more of that artichoke spread on that piece that's going to touch the top, and then put butter over it. Now, the first time I did this, I added my foil wrapped brick on it to press it. and it worked okay except for the buttered side of the bread that was not toasted definitely stuck. So the second sandwich I made, I did not press it until I flipped it over because as I was building the sandwich it toasted anyways, and it worked much better. So the verdict is wait to press it with the brick until you flipped it over the first time. Now this sandwich was just as good as I remember it being back at the restaurant. I love this method because I think it's going to help me make a lot more paninis at once versus using a panini press that you can only do one at a time. I came back from my Waco trip to quite a few jalapeno peppers from the garden that we needed to do something with. So moving on to dinner, I'm going to be using them in this pulled venison street taco recipe. This is inspired by the pulled pork street tacos from the cookbook, and I'm also going to be cooking up the cilantro lime rice and some homemade corn tortillas to go with it. Before we start on making dinner though, let me show you how I quick pickled these jalapenos from the garden from the Volume 1 cookbook. To begin, I'm bringing 3 cups of water, vinegar, sugar, salt, and garlic to a boil over high heat in a big sauce pot. I added extra garlic in so that I could have a full clove in each jar. Next, I sliced up all of my jalapenos and I even included some sweet peppers that I had in the refrigerator. I really like the variety of color that these sweet peppers added in, plus it tamed down the heat just a tiny bit. Our jalapenos were grown right next to some habaneros, so they were a little bit spicier than normal. There's no official canning required for this recipe, but what's nice is it just goes right in the refrigerator and you just need 3 days to let it pickle until they're ready. Once your mixture is up to a boil, you can dump in your pepper slices and just let them cook for about 7 minutes until they turn to a slightly duller green. Just like with regular canning procedures, you want to make sure you have some nice clean canning jars ready to fill, and once those peppers get nice and done there, you can start filling them up. Now I just strained out the peppers first and filled each jar accordingly. Then I made sure to add in a garlic clove or 2 to each jar, and then after that I just ladled in the juice using a funnel. The recipe says that these jalapenos have a 3-week shelf life in the refrigerator, so these are perfect for small batches and giving away to friends. We were able to get 4 half-pint jars out of this recipe, which is more than what we could consume in 3 weeks, which is why I'm excited to give these away to family and friends. Once you have everything in your jars, just take a clean towel and wipe the rim to ensure a good seal. Now because you filled these jars with hot liquid, as you sit and let them cool, you should hear them pop and seal down. Once the jars are cooled, just put them in the refrigerator and wait 3 days for all those flavors to meld together. These were delicious. I loved the extra garlic and the sweet peppers in there. I'll definitely be making these again. So now let's continue making our dinner. First, I'm going to put together the seasoning rub that I'll be putting on my meat. You can find the exact recipe for this on the blog, but a quick rundown of what's in here. We've got some brown sugar, some cumin, some paprika, some chili powder, onion powder, garlic powder, salt, and pepper. Once you have all your seasonings in, just mix them together and they'll be ready to put on your meat. Now for the liquid part of this, I'm substituting out the apple juice that the recipe called for with 2 tablespoons of apple cider vinegar. Then I'm going to put in 2 cups of broth. Now I mainly made this substitution because I did not have apple juice on hand, but I felt like the extra acid and then the salt from the broth really gave this meat a flavor profile that was very unique and tasty. And a couple more change ups for this recipe. Instead of the pork, I'm going to be putting in some cubed up venison. And again, I'm doing this because it's what I had on hand. We substitute venison quite often for any recipe that calls for pork or beef. So today I'll be making this in my pressure cooker, and I'm just putting all of that seasoning and the liquid together. This meat was partially frozen, but that's what I love about the pressure cooker because you can put it in and set it and just walk away. I cooked mine for 35 minutes on high and then let it do a natural release. When everything was good, I just dumped it out into a pan and used some choppers to shred up the meat. This meat is perfect for making ahead, and in fact, it tasted better to us as leftovers as we ate on it all week. So remember, if you're cooking this for a crowd, do yourself a favor and just make it ahead and reheat it later. You could get creative with using these leftovers. There's lots of options. We tried some nachos one night. You could even try some quesadillas. There's lots of ways to use this type of meat once it's made. Moving on to that cilantro lime rice. Now my girls just love rice, and so do I, and this recipe is on its way to become a family favorite. I've already made it twice since getting the cookbook. So all you're gonna do is start by melting some butter and get it sizzling, and then dump in your dry rice and get it nice and toasty. Toasting the rice like this before you cooked it gave it so much flavor. I just loved how it turned out, and it almost reminded me of the box mix rice-a-roni, but so much better because it was fresher tasting. I did this over medium-high heat and just watched it closely so it didn't burn, and once it was toasted, I added in some broth and brought it down to low heat to keep simmering away until all that liquid was gone and the rice was cooked. While the rice was cooking, I put together the topping that we will put over it when it's all finished, and all that is some melted butter, some fresh squeezed lime juice, and some fresh cilantro straight from the garden here, all chopped up. So I'll just mix that together, and then when my rice was finished, I poured it over top, fluffed it all up, and you are ready to eat. Guys, if you don't try any other recipe from today, you have to try this cilantro lime rice. It was delicious. Now the last thing on the list to complete before dinner's ready is some homemade corn tortillas. This Volume 2 cookbook has great recipes for all types of breads like pastas, muffins, rolls, anything you want, it's in there. So to throw these corn tortillas together, I'm going to do a mixture here of some masa corn flour with some salt and some hot water. And I'm just going to use my hands to get that nice and together. And the test that they tell you to make sure that this is right is when you press it together that it doesn't come apart. It stays like a smooth ball. So there you can see that I added a little more water in, and I was just testing it to make sure it had plenty of moisture. Now I'll just divide that out into 8 pieces, starting with the 4, and put it into my cast iron tortilla press. Over the years, I've had friends share with me their recipes for their family's homemade corn tortillas, and it just seemed like I could never get it right. So I was really excited for this recipe, and it did turn out just about perfect. And now you're ready to start cooking. I've preheated my griddle up and sprayed a little bit of oil to prevent any kind of sticking, and you'll cook it on that first side for about 30 seconds. You'll notice that it'll really start steaming up, and that's your cue to go ahead and flip it over to the second side. Now on the second side, I cooked it for about 30 seconds more, and then I flipped it over for the final time and moved it over to my back burner because it was a little cooler back there and it gave it more time to rise. Now this is my favorite part about cooking corn tortillas right here, is on these final flips when you set it on there to rise, you'll see that as air gets in between the layers, it starts to inflate, and that's how you know that you've done it right and that your tortilla is almost finished cooking. And this is going to keep those soft but toasty on the outsides. So now it's time to plate all of this up. I'm going to start with my meat, and then I'll go in with some grated cheddar cheese, some salsa, some of those jalapenos that we had pickled in the refrigerator, and then finally some fresh cilantro. And I'll add a generous helping there on the side of that delicious cilantro lime rice, and we are finished. This is dinner tonight, and I'm telling you, I probably went back for seconds and thirds. It was so good. Well guys, that's all for today. I hope you were inspired today to celebrate the everyday with some family meals that are inspired from these cookbooks. You can visit the blog for all the printables and the recipe exacts. And don't forget to help me out here and hit subscribe so you can stay up to date on all of our new videos. And be sure to let me know in the comments below if you've tried anything from the video today.